introduce you to my friend Julie, who is a holistic nutritionist here in Victoria. And she's put a lovely presentation together about the importance of a balanced diet and a balanced meal to get our kids through the day. And she's stuck in a little there information about our hidden sugars. Because you know what? Sugar is in everything and we don't even realize it. So I'm super excited to introduce you to Julie, and I'll let her take it from here.
Thank you, Katrina. I appreciate that. So yeah, basically today we just I want to break down childhood nutrition, just because I think that the children are the future, and I really wish that I had a lot of the information that I have now back as a kid. It would have really set me up in a whole different way for life. And instead, I didn't really get into it until my 20s. And so to see what a difference it made for me in my 20s was profound. So it's really cool to have the opportunity to talk to parents of young kids and get them started early. There we go. To start this off, basically to break down childhood nutrition, we're just talking about making sure that our children are eating healthy foods that help them grow and develop normally, as well as to help prevent obesity and future diseases. Yeah, you really need to think of nutrition as being preventative, because that really is just the whole goal with it. Kids have really high energy demands, so we're looking to find a balance between the high energy that they require and the dense nutrients that they need to grow and just develop into adolescence, essentially. It's how our kids eat today also will have a striking impact on their health throughout adolescence and adulthood, and it's really going to set them up with the habits that they carry on into their adult years, which is then really going to help them just age healthfully. There are many benefits of good nutrition, but as far as kids go, we're really looking at how much it's going to help them perform at school, what an impact it has on their moods, how it helps them develop strong bones and growing healthfully, maintaining a healthy weight, and like we said with the prevention, just really reducing the risk of chronic diseases and illnesses. And we really are hoping to establish just healthy food preferences for them that will continue as they grow as well. There are also many consequences of poor nutrition. Again, difficulty in school is huge, which we'll get into in more detail. Cognition is very affected by poor nutrition. Poor growth in muscle development, delayed puberty, multiple nutrient deficiencies can happen, mental irregularities for young girls once they hit puberty, having a reduced work capacity, a much higher risk of injuries, higher rates of illness, increased risk of eating disorders, and of course, obesity, which we are seeing happen in younger and younger kids. Just to kind of break down, we hear the word nutrients all the time, so I thought I would just give a quick little disclaimer on that. So nutrients is pretty much an umbrella term for many things, and the ones that we hear about the most, I'd say, are our macros, where we're always hearing about our carbohydrates, our proteins, our fats. I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail today, because that's the easiest way to kind of look at your meals and figure out how to organize them. And then whereas your micronutrients are more your minerals and your vitamins, and these are much more essential for our metabolism and biological processes to take place, whereas our macros are going to be providing us with the bulk of our energy requirements in our day. This is a quick just little breakdown of some of the physical things that can happen when we have nutrient deficiencies. So you see just lots of poor bone development, problems with our hormones and our growth, some skeletal abnormalities, and it definitely affects the muscle development. But once we actually get into the cognitive and mental development things, you see that many of the nutrients play a really important role in learning and developing. If you just kind of quickly even scan through this list, you see loss of memory show up multiple times. You see a decrease in IQ show up. You see lots of different behavioral and emotional instabilities come up with these deficiencies. Easy distractibility, lack of attention. So all of these things are so important when we're sending our kids off to school and expecting them to learn. They really need to have, it goes on to the second page with a lot of those same things that I just listed. These all of this is so important for learning. And so it could be a little piece of the puzzle if we're seeing our children struggling in school. And then basically, yeah, to get these nutrients, what we're really trying to do is just eating a super varied diet of whole foods, limiting the processed foods, definitely limiting the sugar, and really just focusing on getting as many colors from fruits and vegetables as you can, because those different colors are signaling different nutrients and different contents that we are finding in those foods. Supplementation is also a really good strategy to make sure that we're meeting all of these requirements, especially in the world that we are living in today. And I will also touch on that more later on in the presentation. This slide I wanted to put together because this is what I consider to be more of an ideal whole foods pyramid. Lots of our kids in school are taught the Canada Food Guide, and where the Canada Food Guide stands right now, it's just kind of bollocks. Like it's really, really not set up to actually cater to good health. It's set up to benefit industry. It looks like they're actually wanting to change that, and I saw some of the changes. If they go through with it, it's going to be a really bold move, and they're going to make a lot of powerful people really angry, but it's definitely essential to get people moving forwards. So if you look at this chart, actually, you'll see that vegetables are not combined with fruits. They're their own massive food group on the very bottom, and that really is the key. Like, we want to be getting most of our diet from vegetables. That's where you're going to find all of those amazing micronutrients that we were talking about that we need for good metabolism and good brain function. And then you see a nice good chunk of protein there. And what you'll also notice is that dairy does not have its own food category in this pyramid. You'll see some butter in there. I think you can see some milk, and they've just lumped it into some like the healthy fat category, but it absolutely does not need its own giant category. And we'll talk about that a little bit further as well. And then you see kind of your carbohydrates at the top. Fruit is actually broken up into its own category. And the reason for this is fruit is amazing and there's lots of nutrients in it, but there's still quite a lot of sugar. So that's what we need to be watching out for with especially some of our tropical fruits. And then I put this big glass of water because we also want to ensure that for our kids and for ourselves, we're getting tons of water. It's so important. It is literally, it's life. I wanted to break down the macronutrients just a little bit further because this is really what we want to be thinking about when we think about how to be preparing our meals and our snacks for our kids as well as for ourselves. So if you look at this chart, you can see that when you're looking at the carbohydrates and how quickly it converts to blood sugar, it's really sharp and really quick. So if we're eating a lot of carbohydrates for breakfast or in our snacks, you're going to see that you have a rapid rise in blood sugar, but just as rapidly as it rises, you're going to watch that it falls off really quickly. And so if we continue this throughout the day, you see where the massive just like roller coaster of blood sugar imbalances comes in. And that's what we're really trying to regulate. So once you go down to the green line there, you see proteins. And so you see that it's a little bit more gradual, a little bit more spread out. Whereas when we get down to fats, it's super spread out. So that's where we really want to be focusing with our meals and our snacks to keep our kids sustained and happy and not have these big spikes and crashes. It really affects their moods and their ability to learn in school. So ideally, we're kind of trying to make a combination of these three things together in a snack to just make it much better on your blood sugar levels. And that's a perfect intro into talking about fat because there's still such a myth in our society that eating fat makes you fat. And this has just been debunked so many times. It's not correct. We really want our kids to be eating good, healthful fats and moving away from sugar. Sugar and carbohydrates are absolutely, without a doubt, what causes you to put on weight and keep it on. Whereas if we actually break down fat a little bit more, not only does fat make you fat, by consuming more fat in your diet, it's actually what's teaching and your body to learn how to burn fat for fuel. So yeah, it's fantastic for keeping weight under control. It also helps you to grow muscle faster, which is super important for our kids because they're growing so quickly. It really helps to curb junk food and carbohydrate cravings. And if you think back to that chart we were just looking at, it's because it's controlling that big, sharp spike. Without that sugar crash, it's preventing us from like craving sugar to get us back up to the top of that little graph again. It also supplies our bodies with essential nutrients that are only found in fats. We need fats to absorb our fat-soluble nutrients, which are A, D, E, and K. So if we don't have fat while we're consuming those nutrients, it's actually quite hard for our bodies to uptake those nutrients into our cells. One cool thing about fat too is when you're cooking with fat is it's actually preventing the loss of other nutrients while you are cooking. So yeah, just like there are good carbs and bad carbs, there are also good fats and bad fats. So weird. So yeah, everything on this list is a fantastic source of fat. So you have like your nuts and seeds. This is a really quick and easy thing to throw as snacks for your kids at school as well. Avocado is an amazing good source of fat. Wild fish is an amazing source of fat. You have like avocados and avocado oil. Olives and olive oil are fantastic. Coconut oil is amazing. I love coconut oil. Super good for just brain health and energy. And yeah, so basically any fat that's made in nature, you can call it a good fat. And that's also a really good way to know what bad fats are. Any man-made fat is toxic and bad. So basically any vegetable oil you see in like this top picture within the clear plastic bottles, you can pretty much guarantee that that is just going to cause an inflammatory storm within the system. And it's most of these fats that we're seeing in the top right of this screen that end up in our processed foods. So our processed foods are just full of like canola and soy and the cheapest oils they can basically put in there, which just causes so much inflammation in the body. And we really want to be avoiding those. Margarine is absolutely not fit for consumption. It should not be considered a food. If you actually look down to this bottom right corner, I love this. It's like, bugs know it, like they won't touch it. They won't touch it. So the butter is just like covered with them consuming it, and the fat reduced margarine and the margarine, like they have no interest because I think it's like one molecule away from plastic or something along those lines. Since we broke down basically, what good quality fat is, I want to talk about some good quality proteins as well and just break down what it means when we talk about proteins. So 11 of them we produce in our own body. So these ones are considered non-essential, but there are 9 that we require from food and from our diet, which makes them essential, of course. This gets the word essential and non-essential gets most important when you're talking about like vegan or vegetarian eaters, because we need to make sure that they're getting all of the essential amino acids, whereas a meat eater is a little bit easier because anytime you eat an animal food, you will be getting every essential amino acid within that food. You can find some vegetarian sources of complete proteins, like quinoa is an example, hemp is an example, coconut's an example, as well as beetroot. There are more than that, but that's just a little good couple of examples for you. And if you look kind of into this top right, these are considered like the highest protein source foods, and I like the way that he's broken it down because he really does stick to quality when he writes them. So he doesn't just say beef, he says grass-fed beef. He has whey protein in there for anyone who doesn't have dairy sensitivities. Lentils for vegetarian eaters. Beans and lentils are a fantastic source of protein. Wild fish, definitely. Natto is like a fermented soy food, I believe, and it has a significant amount of protein in it as well. And notice how they say raw milk for their milk versus just saying milk, free-range eggs, and raw cheese versus pasteurized. And we will kind of break down why he's making that distinction with his dairy product, I think in this next slide. So we hear over and over and over how important it is to drink milk for strong bones, for our kids to grow. And this is just pervasive in our society. It's a huge part of our food guide, and it's just not true. What we have done to our milk makes a statement not true. So if we were still able to go to a farmer and get raw milk and unpasteurized cheeses, then it would be true. That calcium is super readily available to the body. But what we have done is we've basically gone off and we have pasteurized all of it, and pasteurizing basically kills it. And what's left once dairy has been pasteurized is a compound that's called calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is an acid. And because our body relies on such a narrow pH in the system, once we fill it with all this like acidic, all the acid from basically dairy and meat and those things, our body needs to buffer it. And in order to buffer it, it actually is going to be pulling the calcium and other minerals from our bones in order to buffer the acidity we have just given it by consuming these pasteurized dairy products. Dairy is also one of it's a super, super common sensitivity in kids and in adults. So I think that if our children are having any sort of dietary upsets or mood upsets at all, I think it's worth at least playing with cutting dairy out of their diet for a little bit and seeing if there is any benefit to that. And as you can see, there's many other vegetable sources and meat sources that we can find a significant amount of calcium if we are concerned about, because calcium is important. We absolutely need it for kids to grow. So you need to be on top of that and make sure they're getting it from another source, even just yogurt. I'm okay with having some full fat yogurt if we're really concerned about calcium. But yeah, we do need to be a little bit cautious with dairy and what we have done to it with our farming practices. Okay, so now let's actually get into breakfast and how do we make these breakfasts look good? So the word breakfast actually is because we are breaking the overnight fast. It's super important. Our bodies have been fasting for at least 8 hours. It's a way to wake up and nourish yourself and get ready for your day and sustain you throughout your day. It helps to meet our nutrient needs. Those who eat breakfast have been proven to do better at school. Breakfast is linked to healthier body weights. It's much better it helps with focus and concentration, which is also super important when our kids are in school. And it has been shown that breakfast eaters have healthier lifestyle habits in general. And yeah, study after study really has supported how important it is for breakfast, especially for kids, because they are using so much energy throughout their day. It's been shown that kids miss less school. It specifically has shown that it makes kids do better in math, 17.5% higher math scores, which is pretty significant. 20% more likely to graduate high school, which is another pretty significant statistic. And yeah, it shows that you can make more annually, but that's a weird one to prove. So this is an example of things that are super common for breakfast. Maybe you guys can already see the problem with all of the foods that I've put up here, but the reason I've put all of these on these slides is every single thing listed here is actually, it has a huge impact on our blood sugar. And it's basically getting our kids all hopped up on sugar and then sending them off and expecting them to learn adequately. I wanted to break this down a little bit more just to kind of prove my point. So I picked what someone may think is the healthiest cereal off of this top left little cereal one here. And I broke down Raisin Bran with a glass of orange juice and broke down what that would look like as far as sugar goes. So a good rule of thumb too, when we're reading nutrition labels, this is super important when it comes to sugar, is where it tells you the sugars. If you see on this label how it says 13 grams of sugar, that's not telling the whole picture, because all carbohydrates are sugar and break down to sugar once they're digested. So the way to actually figure out the adequate amount of sugar in a food is to take your total carbohydrate number that they listed for you minus the fiber, because fiber is a carbohydrate that cannot be digested, and that number is the actual amount of sugar that is in that food item. So for the Raisin Bran, it says for one box, I'm assuming these is one of those little individual serving boxes, 31 grams of sugar when you do that. And a good rule of thumb too, to figure out to put a picture to that, is to know that 4 grams of sugar is equivalent to 1 teaspoon. So that's some kind of quick math that you can do when you're in the grocery store and you're looking at labels. Another thing most people don't realize is that milk contains a lot of sugar. Lactose is actually the sugar of milk. So now you have your Raisin Bran with your sugar. So we have your almost 8 teaspoons of sugar from the Raisin Bran, 3 teaspoons of sugar from your milk, and then we're going to send them off with a cup of orange juice as well. And because orange juice has lost all of its fiber and it's all just, it takes a lot of oranges to juice into 1 cup, it's actually a significant amount of sugar when you drink it like that. So all in all, Raisin Bran with a glass of orange juice before school is equivalent to almost 18 teaspoons of sugar before you have even started your day. And that's significant. And imagine if I were to actually choose one of the sweeter sugars or like a piece of white toast and jam, like you'd be hitting over 20 teaspoons of sugar without a doubt.
Julie, I just want to make sure that parents also, when they're reading their labels, actually check on the amount that one serving is, because sometimes you look at, one serving is only this many calories and it's like 3 crackers.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
the serving size is super significant. Yeah, that's something to pay attention to, definitely. Thank you for saying that. There's also a million names that they hide sugar in on labels too. So I was just brought this up just as just to know it. They're very sneaky. They're super sneaky with nutrition labels. And it's just another reason why we just want to be avoiding food that comes in boxes and packages as much as possible, because they've made it really confusing to be an educated consumer, because it makes more sense for them for you to be confused, because it's a lot easier to sell you products that way. So there's 1,000,001 different words for sugar inside food. That's just something I wanted to make a point of. This is just a little slide that breaks down what it looks like when a kid has a sugar rush versus a sugar crash. You're going to get the sugar rush first, which they have the rapid rise in blood sugar. This alters their mental status, resulting in what we call, their sugar high, where they just have erratic behavior and emotional outbursts. This I kind of touched on earlier with the dairy conversation, but to metabolize sugar, minerals are also pulled from the bones, teeth, and other parts of the body, because sugar is going to create a more acidic situation in our bodies as well that needs to be buffered. The immunity gets suppressed by sugar for at least 5 hours, which is crazy, especially when you're thinking about, kids are around so many other kids and germs and you name it. We want to be supporting their immune system as much as possible. Definitely helps promote like candida. If you haven't heard of that, it's basically like a yeast overgrowth in the system that a lot of people suffer with these days. It decreases your feelings of being full. You're constantly it's an addiction. So you're constantly looking to get more of that sugar, that dopamine release that sugar gives you. And then you have the flip side of this, where you get into the sugar crash. And now we have a low blood sugar situation where, again, you're reaching for more sugar. Your hormones all kick in. You get tired, weak, shaky, moody. So cortisol and adrenaline get released actually from the sudden drop in blood sugar. And those are your stress hormones. Increased risk from cavities, again, because of that pulling of minerals from the bones and the teeth to buffer all the acidity of the sugar. The excess glycogen that's now being formed converts to fat. So that is the process within which sugar is causing us to gain weight. And this little chart in the middle. So they cut sugar in a kid's diet down for 9 days. I believe it was obese children they did this on. 43 children ages between 9 and 18 who were obese. And you see that their blood pressure dropped by 4.3%. Their bad cholesterol decreased by 12.5%. Their fasting triglycerides was down by 46%, which is super significant. And their insulin levels were down by 53%. And that was only 9 days. And that wasn't even cutting all of it. That was just that was reducing the sugar that they were consuming. So it really it has a huge impact, and sugar is in everything, and it's really targeted to kids. So it's something to be super aware of. And just look at the stats. 1 in 3 children are now considered obese. It's shocking, and it's just setting them up for a world of prediabetes, joint issues, sleep apnea, low self-esteem, which is huge for our kids going through middle school and high school. The bottom left photo is kind of just going into the addiction cycle that sugar creates. So it's basically, you eat the sugar, you like it, you crave it. It definitely has addictive properties. It spikes your blood sugar levels. This is where all that dopamine and those good feeling addiction hormones get released. Now your blood sugar falls rapidly. And when this happens, it's just then your body starts just craving. So it's just perpetuating system over and over and over again until you really intervene and kind of get that addiction under control again. soft drinks are a big issue. Like if you look at this chart and you see where a lot of the different kids and age groups are getting their added sugar, soft drinks is pretty much the biggest chunk in almost every single one of them. And then cereals, cakes, and biscuits. Yeah, so that stuff all comes in the breakfast time as well. So it's really trying to like limit some of those carbs for breakfast is super beneficial also. Yeah, so there are good carbs and bad carbs. I don't want to label all carbs as being bad. Basically, good carbs, we're talking about them being complex. So they still have their fiber and their bran and just things that cause them to be digested more slowly and release the sugar into your system more slowly. So whereas the bad carbs are considered simple. So this is a lot of your just refined, simple, white carbohydrates, like your pastas, your breads, your candies, your soft drinks. And these help you store fat, whereas a complex one are going to help you lose fat because they require so much more energy to actually break them down. I really like this chart on the right because it is, the great carbs are awesome. I love that they separated berries out and actually put them in the Eat Me Anytime. Berries are incredible. They're so full of antioxidants. They're super low glycemic. They're not hard on your blood sugar. So when we're trying to like maybe even get our kids off of this little sugar addiction that they're on, berries are a good tool to be using as snacks. And it's just like something that they feel like they're getting that's sweet, but it's way more beneficial for them. Whereas then we have like our sweeter fruits kind of in the middle. There's still so many great vitamins and minerals and stuff going on in there, but we do need to be aware that they still have a high sugar content. So they're more of a treat, as well as like your starchy veggies, like your sweet potatoes and squash and all of that. And then the bad carbs is really where we're getting into like the sugary drinks, the processed snacks. And they have lumped grains and breads in here, where for an adults, it makes a little bit more sense, but for our kids, they do have really high energy needs and they do burn through their carbohydrates. So as long as we're giving them like nice, complex, like whole grains, whole wheat bread, just like bread with seeds and grains in them, like I'm going to say that's fine for kids. That gets to be more of an issue when our metabolism slows down a little bit as we age. But just note that any of these grains and carbohydrates do break down to sugar in the system. So yeah, it's quite like as the common breakfast that we're already eating, like our oatmeals and our toast and our cereal, there are ways to adjust them to make it so that we're making it like a combination of the healthy fat and quality protein, just to make it more sustaining and more nourishing for our kids before sending them off to school. So yeah, with your oatmeals, like you can just add some nuts or nut butters, like peanut butters and almond butters, and you can also make it, this says with milk, but I prefer like a nut milk. Like you can just cook it right in coconut milk, and then add some of those berries that we just talked about. And now you have like a fully complete healthy meal that only took you, 30 seconds to a minute longer to make. With toast, same thing. Instead of putting on jam, which is like super sweet, let's put on some peanut butter or some nut butters, or have it with a hard-boiled egg or a fried egg. And then the cereals that we talked about, instead of even like using the dairy or the milk, I like that they've suggested here, maybe sprinkling some on some plain yogurt and adding some fruit and berries. And again, all three of those things are super quick and still easy to throw your kid out the door with, but now you've made it more complex and complete for them. Here's just some nice little photo options of some things that are still quick and are just a better breakfast options than the stuff that we looked at on that original slide. If you guys haven't heard of overnight oats, man, you can just do this on a Sunday and prep your whole week, and it'll take you 5 minutes. You're just basically putting some oats in the bottom, covering it, maybe some chia, some nut milk, some berries, and just putting it in your fridge. And by the time you wake up the next day, you just grab it and eat it. It requires no cooking, no nothing. It cooks itself just sitting in the liquid. So that's a really good option for when we're rushed and we just don't have time to make a meal. Smoothies, I love recommending smoothies, especially for kids that might be picky eaters. It's a place that we can kind of hide some greens or just hide some other things from them that they might otherwise not eat if you were to just make them a salad, for example. Some yogurt with some granola and fruit and berries is fantastic and super easy. Eggs are always great. I love eggs. I think they're basically like the perfect food. The top right one, you can totally just like prep these all in like a muffin tin and just warm them up for the week. So that can be really simple and easy for busy parents as well. Some snack ideas while sticking to pairing things up. Little energy balls. You can make your kids think they're having like a little chocolate treat, and you can just fill it full of minerals and nuts and seeds and good fats. Nuts and seeds, fantastic snack for kids. Some hummus or guacamole and some mixed veggies, also a really good choice. Crumble, like just cut down on how much sugar you put in your crumble and try to just sweeten it with your berries and your fruit. That's something you can just completely prep and have for breakfast or for snacks or desserts for your kids. Berries, love berries, definitely like those should be for snacks. And then you can do fun stuff with like apples and peanut butter and make those into a fun snack for your kids as well. And then I want to have a quick conversation on supplementation and why it is so important in today's day. I wish that I could say we should be getting everything we need from food, but it's just not possible with the way that we farm things now, with what we're exposed to in our air and water all the time. So it's a pretty extensive little list as to why, but soil depletion is huge. So even the foods that we're growing right now don't even have access to the same nutrients that they once did from the soil. The hybridization of crops that we've done provide lower nutrient foods. Most of our modern fertilizers only supply nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus because that's all plants require to grow. So it really misses out all the trace elements and trace minerals. So yeah, our food is just not as nutritious as it once was. The use of chemical pesticides and herbicides, that's huge. So this is constantly making our food somewhat toxic. So this is this requires just much more antioxidants and nutrients that it might be kind of hard to get just from our food alone. The further food travels, nutrients are diminishing every second that it's off the plant that it grew on, basically. Food processing, so all these foods we're buying in boxes and packages, like that drastically reduces the nutrient content as well. Food additives often deplete nutrients. Anyone that has weak digestion or poor eating habits, this also impairs the absorption of nutrients. Stressful and hurried lifestyles, which is, let's be honest, that's most people's lifestyles these days. This really impairs your digestion and uses up more nutrients. Any illness or infection is also going to increase our nutrient needs. It's actually shown that most babies these days are actually born deficient in many nutrients because this kind of gets, like our farming practices have been this way for a little while. So a lot of time the mother's rather deficient and then the baby's rather deficient. And then that's just how we're starting our lives. Any use of medications also, a lot of medications will deplete specific nutrients in the system. We have toxic chemicals and toxic metals in the air. And the nutritional standards that are currently set, like our recommended daily amounts that they set for nutrients, are really low. And they're just really low because they're not taking into effect all these other things that are increasing our nutrient needs. So being able to basically get your hands on some good quality nutritional supplements is a really good strategy just to make sure you're covering all your bases every day. Some supplements to consider when we're working with kids. Not a ton, really. Like I would really like to see kids on probiotics just because antibiotics are so common when they're growing up with ear infections and you name it. I can't believe how many times I was on antibiotics as a kid. So just getting our kids on a probiotic just to make sure that their gut microbes are doing well. Vitamin D, where we live in the Pacific Northwest, we're only able to produce vitamin C from sunlight for like 3 to 4 months a year. So for the rest of the year, we really, really need to be thinking about vitamin D. And this is really important in kids too, because we need vitamin. You can't build bones or absorb calcium into your bones without vitamin D present. So it's super important for growing. Fish oil is really good for learning, concentration, and brain health. So since this conversation is about learning in school, fish oil is a really good one to add to it. And then just a good quality multivitamin just to make sure that we're covering all our bases with at least a little bit of all the nutrients every single day.
Can I just jump in for a minute, Julie?
Yeah.
Just talking about supplements, several times talking to different therapists, different nutritionists, different homeopaths. The one thing that's always come up, especially if your child's on the autism spectrum, ADHD, something like that, every single one of them has had their clients on folic acid.
Folic acid. Okay, good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I haven't heard that.
Don't ask me how or why. I just know that in my research and asking, that's always the one, like the continuously thing that comes up.
And it's a really hard one to get from your food, because like as soon as you even cut a lettuce leaf or cook it, almost all the folic acid gets oxidized and disappears instantly. So
good to know.
Yeah, so it's just a tricky one to get from your food unless you're just eating like piles of raw greens. Yeah, it's a very sensitive nutrient. I'll add that to this slide.
No, it's just something that it's just occurred all the time. So I was like,
that's why it's so huge for pregnant women, and why that's like the main thing that they need to make sure that they're getting as well. We're going to kind of switch gears a little bit, because I did mention that we're going to talk about movement, how important that is. So I just wanted to talk about physical activity and what an impact that has on learning for a second. And yeah, there's so much that kids can learn even through physical activity, like learning how to move. They learn about themselves. The word exercise is actually just a subcategory of physical activity, and it's basically defined as a planned, structured, and repetitive physical activity. Whereas physical activity in general, just making sure you're moving your body and you're just like up and you're playing and you're, just not living a sedentary lifestyle, basically. It plays a big role in academic achievement, making like you're moving your body. All the latest studies show a positive link between physical activity and learning outcomes. The positive effects have been noticed in mathematical subjects in particular. Participation in training for a sports club or team has been linked to good performance in school. It has also been demonstrated that by extending time spent in physical education class and breaks while decreasing the time spent in academic classes did not show any deterioration in academic learning outcomes. So you are able to actually take some time out from learning and spend more time playing and still see the same academic outcomes, which is great. It's also been shown to have impressive benefits for cognitive function, such as memory, attention, and general information processing and problem-solving skills, all super important in school. And the latest studies indicate that physical activity increases test scores, specifically in areas of memory and attention. And then in addition to academic achievement and cognitive skills, physical activity also appears to promote other aspects that are important in terms of learning, such as classroom behavior, concentration on assignments, participation in classwork. And physically active pupils also have higher goals for further studies after comprehensive school. And physically fit pupils are absent from school less frequently than less fit peers. So all super positive things as to why we need our kids out moving about and playing. And this is one area that I'm super passionate about, and that is actually playing and getting our exercise out in green spaces and out in nature. And there's a bunch of different terms for this. Some people call it ecotherapy, some people call it nature therapy or green therapy, but essentially it's the name given to a wide range of treatment programs which aim to improve your mental and physical well-being through doing outdoor activities in nature. And there are many positive health benefits from connecting with nature in this way. For kids, it's just like, it's been like, it's shown massive improvements in kids that have been diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. So much so that there are some people that have renamed ADHD as basically being a nature deficiency syndrome. It's so beneficial. Like especially I think if your kid has been told to be hyperactive, I think getting them outside in the forest and in nature is a good strategy to try. It reduces stress in our kids. It boosts their cognitive functioning. What are some of these stats? Some of these stats are pretty impressive. So children who spent regular time in unstructured outdoor play are better able to concentrate and perform better in the classroom. That was like a 78% increase, which is huge. And it also just gives our kids allows them to fall in love with nature too and want to protect it as they get older. And we know that we need more people growing up with that stuff in mind, which is so important.
I think that's why we're seeing such more outdoor schools and outdoor kindergartens and outdoor schools nowadays. I can think of at least 4 here in Victoria that don't necessarily all of them operate full time, but they are at least operating 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, basically that closes it off, which is a good quote about why it's so important to teach kids these things.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. I totally agree. Like, we can't expect our kids to do well at school, to be able to pay attention, to focus, to even memorize or retain any of this information if they don't have a good nutritional foundation before sitting down in that classroom.
Definitely.
So I thank you so much for your time.
No worries.
And I hope we can share this with as many people as we can, because I think it's really important.
Thanks for logging on, Jay and Summer, Amy. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Goodbye.